Two sets of rules. But of course, this is also about economics. It always is. It's always about money for imperialists. The number one, right? You have major shipping lanes here, Strait of Taiwan, South China Sea. So I'm going to play you a clip now from CNN. Forgive me. And you'll hear them spit out the truth of what this is about. And keep in mind, this clip from CNN was about 2-3 hours after they announced Aukus yesterday on, September the 16th, right? So no one said China. Boris Johnson didn't say China. Morrison didn't say China. They said Indo-Pacific, but everyone knows it's about China. If you have half a brain, you know it's about China. And so does even CNN admits it. So let's take a look at the clip.
You have been listening to a major national security announcement. President Biden, joined by the leaders, the prime ministers of the United Kingdom and Australia, announcing that the U.S. and U.K. will help Australia acquire and deploy nuclear-powered submarines. That's different than a nuclearly armed submarine, but we'll talk more about that. This is a serious step about countering the increasing flexing of muscle by China in the Pacific. So let's get you up to speed. And frankly, we need to take a moment here and acknowledge that the United States on foreign policy has to a great degree been focused either on counterterrorism, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the threat from Russia. We haven't really, in the news media, focused a great deal on China. So let's talk about how big a deal this is. The U.S. is going to help.
Did you hear the bullshit? Oh, China is flexing their muscle. Really? China? You're sure about that? It's China who's doing this. These are Chinese bases or American bases? China is flexing their muscle. Really? Wow. And do you hear how he says, we've been focusing too much on the Middle East. Let's start a new war. Let's go to war with China.
Australia and the UK are going to help Australia get nuclear-powered submarines. That doesn't mean a nuclear-armed submarine, right?
It does not. That's a very important distinction, which, as we note, the president took care to make. It is a big deal, no matter how you look at it.
So just to remind you who James Clapper is, he lied to Congress about NSA mass surveillance. You remember? They asked him, is the NSA collecting data about anyone? About everyone, rather, about all Americans? Is it spying on all Americans? Literally, with his hand over his face. No. Isn't that perjury when you lie to Congress? Isn't that something you could go to jail for? Oh, no. He has a job at CNN now. And then they call other people, they call other news outlets state media. Wow.
On several levels. First, in my mind, it really breathes life into the notion of a pivot to Asia, which we've been talking about for a long time.
For decades, yeah.
For decades. And it's a very bold step for the Australian government, the Australian people to take. It conveys...
Why is it a bold step?
Well, the notion of nuclear capabilities are somewhat controversial. They certainly weren't in New Zealand, for example, which, of course, is not part of this. So I just think that, and the fact that given the dependence that Australia has on China for its economy, it's a bold step because clearly the Chinese will view this as provocative, and they should. It also, I think, demonstrates a real pivot away from the distractions that you mentioned, Afghanistan, counterterrorism,
distractions.
Into a strategic relationship that we've always had a close relationship with Australia, clearly. Certainly, I can attest to in the intelligence domain. This will profoundly...
Okay, so do you see what he's doing here? The United States just got embarrassed in Afghanistan, right? Well, it depends. The arms contractors, the private contractors, the arms dealers, they made bank. They made lots of money. They haven't been embarrassed. Afghanistan was a win for them. But politically speaking, right? I know politicians fail upwards, but the United States has egg on its face, right? They just got kicked out of Afghanistan. So now he's trying to downplay that. So this is just a distraction. The real threat is in China. Look, the Chinese, quick, we have to go to China, South China Sea. They just fucking love war. They're just so bloodthirsty. They can't stop it. They can't stop it. These people are fucking addicted to war.
buttress the capability of the Australian Navy, and in a sense expand the size of the fleet available, of the attack submarine fleet available to the United States. Because
oh God, don't you just love it when they're actually honest on mainstream media? Expand the size of an available attack fleet to the United States, right? He just told you, he's just admitting on television, this isn't about Australia. It's about the United States having a bigger fleet, a bigger military presence, a bigger military footprint to counter China. Well, counter is the wrong word because that means that China has done something. Can you name something? Because they can't. You'll see in a moment, right? He's admitting this isn't just for Australia. It's for the United States. We will have a bigger attack fleet. He's saying it to you. And he's right also when he says that Australians are against nuclear. They don't like that. He said it in so many words. And he's right that the Chinese are right to be to feel threatened by this. You know, China is Australia's largest trading partner, right? So this is a very weird predicament where they're saying that Australia's biggest trading partner is also a threat to Australia somehow. Wow. How does that work exactly? They use these abstract phrases like the growing presence of China, the flexing of muscle. What the fuck does that mean? What does this mean concretely? Peace and security. Peace and security from what? Do you see how they create threats out of thin air? And even when Australia is benefiting from trade with China, although, yeah, that's debatable now because of this trade war, but generally speaking, they need China it's the largest trading partner, right? Even though China is Australia's largest trading partner, they're still trying to put Australia, yank it into the US camp, no pun intended. And, they're endangering Australians at the end of the day because he just said that this is all about the US. If God forbid some war starts, who do you think is going to go first? It's the Australians. Australia is a US base, just like every other country that the United States has bases in. It doesn't have friends. You just saw what they did with France, right? France was a big ally. They're literally about to celebrate that France helped them during the War of Independence. They just screwed France in a second like that and gave the deal to someone else. This is what they do. This is what the United States does, right? Just like it screwed its Afghan allies and left those behind, yeah, in Afghanistan. Or just like it screwed Saddam Hussein, right? They used Saddam Hussein as a pawn. Go attack Iran. Okay, here's some chemical weapons, which he used against Iran. He used against the Kurds. And then when they were done using him, you saw what they did to Saddam. This is how the U.S. behaves. And when they're done with Australia, they'll do the same. They will leave Australia hanging. That's to do with everyone.
Because we are so interoperable. So in my mind, in several levels, a really big deal, and coincidentally coming on the right, timed to coincide with the 70th anniversary of the ANZUS Treaty, the Australia, New Zealand, U.S. treaty. So it's yet another layer of the intimate partnership we have with Australia and the UK.
Okay, Colonel Layton, for people who have not been focusing entirely on Chinese assertions, aggressions in the Pacific, what has led up to this, that Australia, the United States, and the UK would feel the need to reassert the alliance and say, and you know what, we're going to give some powerful submarines to Australia to push back against China? What has China been doing that has the West so alarmed?
So, Jake, the most obvious thing is what's been happening in the South China Sea. What you have is an area that's been claimed by China, by the People's Republic of China, for really since they took over mainland China in the late 1940s. And what those claims are based on natural resources or perceived natural resources in those areas. So it's between Vietnam, the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, and of course China and Taiwan. So that's the first part of it. So what we're talking about here is making sure that what we call the sea lanes of communication are open. So what does that mean? That means that the trade routes that we use on the open seas need to be protected in the US and Australian and UK view. They need to be protected by our collective forces in order to make sure that no other navy can interfere with the trade routes as they exist right now. So that means any oil, for example, that comes from the Middle East, any raw materials that come from Africa, things that China depends on a great deal.
But have they been doing that? Have the Chinese been stopping those trade routes?
Not yet. But the
Oh, you bitch. China hasn't done anything. He just said it to you. Not yet. There's always a threat, right? It's not real, but who knows, right? Bush doctrine, preemptive strike. We have to go in for, they might do something. We don't know if they haven't done anything, but they might do something. So we have to go. We have to start wars. Oh, it's the same shit. He just said it to you, right? Tape Jacker, Jake Tapper. He's like, have they done any of that? Have they been interfering with any of our oil coming in, any raw materials, with our shipping lanes? They don't belong to the West, although they like that. But have they been interfering with any of our economic activities? Not yet. Okay, so they haven't done anything. Do you see how when you actually press them on what they're saying, it just collapses, it just falls apart? There's no threat. China, he just admitted to you, China hasn't done anything to them, right? So they always have to make up threats. And he is also honest when he says that it's about economics. It always is when we're talking about empire, right? When we talk about the shipping lanes, trade routes, this is key. This is what it's all about. And they are afraid of China because China is not going to do anything to them. He just said they've never done anything to them. They haven't interfered with them. But they don't like China because China is on its way to be the world's largest economy. Right, is on its way to be the next superpower. It already has the world's biggest navy. Yeah? It has more ships than anyone else. And they don't like this. Capitalists don't like this because when you have competition, what do capitalists do? They like to monopolize. Yes? That's what they do. They will buy up everything and take it. And if you don't give it to them, they'll take it by force. Right? So when Iraq nationalizes its oil and locks out Western companies, they will come to Iraq and they will fucking take that oil. Halliburton will take that oil, right? Western companies will take the oil if you don't give it to them, right? Iran nationalizes its oil, they coup Mossadegh. They will take the oil if you don't give it to them. They'll take it. Syria doesn't want to build a pipeline, they will take Syria. They will take the oil in northeastern Syria as well, right? So imperialist capitalists, they steal. This is obvious. They are so lazy that they even enslave people, right? What they did with the Atlantic Triangle, the slave trade, they will even steal human beings to do the work for them because they are so lazy and they are such thieves, right? They steal the raw materials, they steal the natural resources, and then they steal human beings. They enslave human beings to build up their empires, to build up their homelands. And then they go, look, everyone who's not white is lazy. Wow, you got some fucking nerve. You got some nerve. So this is what it's all about, right? It's a perceived, it's a made up threat about the Chinese. Chinese haven't done anything. It's not me saying that. I just showed you the clip. CNN is saying that, or admitting that rather, right? Let's use these abstract phrases because that works on people somehow.
The fear is that they could, and they haven't been doing so directly. And the other part of this is Taiwan. The Chinese have made lots of noises in the last few months about taking over Taiwan as part of their, bringing it back into China. They're really making sure that they can go ahead and take over what the Chinese nationalists have had since the late 1940s.
And here we go again.
What they're also doing is they're making sure that civil liberties in Hong Kong are being curtailed. So you have three things going on the open side of things. Mm-hmm. And then beneath all of that, you have a big cyber war that's going on between...
Right, so this is again what we hear with, human rights violations. Yo, you want to talk to me about human rights violations? I spoke to Mansour Ad-Daifi, who was in Guantanamo Bay for 14 years, okay? I spoke to him a few days ago. I never want to hear the fucking word or phrase human rights violations come out of the United States or the West's mouth again after what he told me, which will be up on the channel. 14 years he was in Guantanamo Bay. You have no idea You have no idea. And then they're running this torture camp in Cuba and have the nerve to say that people are being unjustly imprisoned in Cuba. Just the hypocrisy. You couldn't make this up. And so they do the same shit here, right? The NSA spies on everyone. They have full cooperation with American tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, you name it. And then they deflect from this, they distract from this by saying, look, the Chinese, Huawei, they are the ones abusing their technology and spying on everyone. Really? You did nothing to do with that? And then you see how the police were just beating the shit out of people during the last year, during the George Floyd protests. You see the torture camps that they've got going on, the CIA black sites, Guantanamo Bay. And then they say that the Chinese are abusing human rights. This is really hilarious. This is really hilarious. I mean, that they have the nerve to talk about human rights violations after what they do. This is amazing. This is amazing to me, really.
China and the United States. And all of that speaks to a large picture where China and the U.S. are really fighting each other in a virtual way. But what is happening now is the United States is moving its focus, along with the UK and Australia, into the Pacific and making good on the plan, as General Clapper mentioned, to do this over the last few decades.
And we should note that, first of all, it's very clear to President Biden that President Xi, whom he's known for decades, I think, is not.
So I'll save you the torture of having to listen to the whole clip because now they start talking about, oh, this is about democracy versus, autocrats, Xi Jinping and Putin, they're proposing a different model. And I think this is really interesting because they are correct in the sense that it's a competition, but not the way they are trying to frame it. They're trying to say that, we support democracy, we, the free Western world, versus the savages, the people who are dictators, the people who are, authoritarians. This is how they're framing it, literally. I mean, it's just a few seconds later, right? So that's not what's going on here. That's not what's going on here.
China of Mao, perhaps the way that Putin longs for the old USSR, Xi longs for the old China of Mao, perhaps, and that this is, in President Biden's view, part of the struggle between democracy versus autocracy.
Yeah, that has been
right. Once again, they have to frame it like we are the benevolent white saviors. We are the saviors of the free world. No, this is bullshit. America is the capital of imperialism and of capitalism, no pun intended. And they feel threatened by China because China proposes a different model. It doesn't mean you have to like China. I've never been to China, right? But the thing that's going on here is that China is doing better than them economically. And China does not invade other countries. China doesn't have to go stealing and killing and pillaging to achieve the same things and actually better results. And so they feel threatened that how is this country, which is different from our model, succeeding? No, we can't have that. They perceive it as a threat, right? I told you, capitalists, imperialists, they don't like competition. Competition is a threat. That's how they perceive it. So they have to take, they have to steal, they have to kill. This is what they do, right? And I find this so ironic how, just to show you the resistance versus imperialism, you have American trucks stealing oil from Syria going into Iraq. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is bringing in fuel from Iran to Lebanon. You see the difference? China does not have the same model as the United States. It doesn't go around invading other countries and stealing and killing and pillaging. And they don't like that their economy is going to be number one soon. They don't like that China has a sizable military, meaning it can defend itself. This is the real issue here, right? And this is what capitalists feel threatened by. So there's no actual threat here. And again, I find this incredible that they dare to talk about cyber. I mean, did China develop Stuxnet? China is the one who hacked Iran's nuclear program with a virus and sabotaged the centrifuges. You want to talk about cyber threats? They have a whole division at the CIA dedicated to that. Collecting 0 days, exploits, and launching cyber attacks. Again, everything that they say is projection. Everything that they say, they are the ones doing it. This is how they work, and this is the only difference. It's that, you know, they sugarcoat their bullshit. That's the only difference between Western media and everyone else. They sugarcoat it. They project, and then they use these terms. Oh, you know, it's democracy versus autocracy. What democracy? Just look in the mirror, man. And I just want to show you this again, so you can take a look at what Aukus is really. You know, this is their idea of shared values. This is their idea of democracy and peace and security. What peace? What security? What security does Afghanistan have now? Huh? What about Iraq? What have these countries gained? And now you want to go into another region? We already know what they did in Vietnam, right? Laos, Cambodia. This is their idea. And so this entire AUKUS is nothing but a way to provoke China. Right? They want a heightened military presence in the Indo-Pacific, and when they say Indo-Pacific, they mean in China's backyard. And of course, to do that, they make up threats, they lie, they claim that they are the ones acting in good faith and that it's defensive when they're thousands of miles away from their own shores, and that the person that they are bullying, that they are harassing, that they are intimidating with a warships, I mean with armies, literally, they are the ones who are aggressive, right? Very funny how they just invert the entire situation. It's the opposite. Everything is the opposite. Incredible. And people really fall for this bullshit because the media is such a good brainwashing tool. It's incredible. Really incredible. So AUKUS, this is nothing but a tool to intimidate China. It's not defensive. It's got nothing to do with that. Just take a look at the map of the bases, and this is what you will understand. And Australia, I wouldn't be surprised if they put Patriot missiles there. You know, they had a battery of Patriot missile systems, or even if they put nukes there. You know, the way it works with New Zealand has said, this is really interesting because in the last days, you know, since yesterday, you've seen in the media that, oh, New Zealand has said it will... You know, New Zealand won't allow any nuclear ships or submarines through its waters. Yeah, but that's always been their position. That's always been their position. And the fact is, the United States doesn't say. The United States doesn't say whether its vessels are nuclear or non-nuclear. Okay? And then its allies let the ships through anyway. So my point here is that, you know, Australia can say what it wants, but it's been taken hostage by the United States. So the United States only has to set up a couple more consulates, which are actually military bases, just like the one in Baghdad. You know, the U.S. embassy in Baghdad is a fucking a fort, right? It's the size of the Vatican, literally the size of the Vatican. So all they have to do is set up some consulates and put fucking nukes inside them, and who would know and who would complain? They could do anything they like. You know, Australia is a vassal state, unfortunately. And I mean, you look at what's happening to Julian Assange, just one aspect of it. Why do you think Australia won't speak about Julian Assange or won't speak on his behalf? They don't dare because they're being held hostage. Their country is controlled by the United States. They don't have any free will. They're not sovereign anymore, which is unfortunately the case of all the U.S. allies, right? The U.S. doesn't have allies. It only has interests, I think, as the vile Henry Kissinger once put it. And I want to show you a tweet here from David McBride, who was in the SAS, right, in the Australian Defence Forces. He said, we are not the allies of the U.S. We are their slaves. We have sold our sovereignty for submarines we have to pay for anyway. If we wanted nuclear subs, we could have simply bought them elsewhere. This is not about equipment. He's right. He's absolutely right. And, you know, he posted something else also that I wanted to show you, which is so emblematic of, you know, this so-called peace and security that NATO and AUKUS bring, right? This is when he was in Afghanistan, right? The aftermath of a suicide bombing while I was in Uruzgan in 2011. When the U.S. soldiers arrived at the scene, they shot a reporter for the BBC thinking he was a terrorist. He had brown skin. So, yeah. So much for you know, defensive measures, right? This is about imperialism and it's about intimidating China. And that's the bottom line. And don't believe any other bullshit that they tell you. Doesn't mean you have to like China. Doesn't mean you have to agree with either one. But look at the situation for what it is, right? And if we're being very honest, there's nothing to like about aggression, imperialism, intimidation. So I'm not really sure why anyone would be thrilled at such a prospect that you have something like AUKUS, as if, you know, 400 military bases encircling China was not enough, right? It's just never ending. They're going to keep coming up with threats. And as you can see in the media, they're so clever at getting you to stay, at fear mongering and getting you to believe in these made up threats, right? They're even saying it. We've been spending too much time on the Middle East and Afghanistan. These are distractions. China's the new enemy now. And people fall for this. Unbelievable.